Ukraine's counteroffensive is becoming more difficult in the strategically important Kherson region than in other parts of the country because of the weather and terrain.
The European Commission is proposing stricter rules on air quality in order to bring down pollution levels in Europe.
Ukraine's counteroffensive against Russian forces in the southern Kherson region appears to have slowed because of wet weather and the terrain. Ukraine's defense minister, however, claims Kyiv's forces are still putting pressure on Russian troops. The region is strategically important and has been occupied by Moscow since the start of its invasion. Russia's appointed governor in Kherson announced that around 70,000 civilians have been relocated from the right bank of the Dnipro River to the left bank in the Kherson Oblast. The onslaught of the Ukrainian armed forces is said to be the reason, but Ukrainian authorities believe that Russian forces are in fact digging in for the heaviest of battles. In Moscow, President Putin has overseen scheduled military drills, simulating a massive nuclear strike via a video link. The current narrative from the Kremlin continues to claim that Ukraine plans to detonate a radioactive device or a dirty bomb in a false flag attack to blame Russia. No evidence has been provided. Meanwhile, President Zelensky claims Ukrainian intelligence has revealed that Russia has used around 400 Iranian drones against the population of Ukraine.
In western Ukraine, this building has been transformed into a detention camp for Russian prisoners of war. These men lined up to attend morning roll call were arrested by Ukrainian forces on the battlefields. Some of them were clearly scarred from the fighting. This prisoner said his convoy was ambushed in February, and that's when he lost his leg. In this centre there are several hundred inmates, but Kyiv refused to give an exact number. Here the detainees are allowed 2 hours of television a day, but only have access to Ukrainian news, a different perspective for some. This inmate said that the Russian authorities tell viewers one thing and that the Ukrainian TV channels report the opposite. For him, it's hard to compare when nothing is clear. Ukrainian authorities opened up this prison to prove that they respect the Geneva Convention. At the start of the conflict, they were criticized for organizing press conferences in which Russian prisoners had to repent on film. This unnamed prisoner said that while he's not in good spirits, he has to pull himself together. He hopes that one day he'll have an artificial limb, so he'll be able to live his normal life again. The Red Cross was able to visit this prison, but it's yet to publish its findings. There are, however, other detention centres like this one for Russian prisoners that have not yet been visited by the press or international human rights groups.
The United Nations has issued a warning that the world is not doing enough to combat climate change. Only 24 out of 193 nations submitted updated and strengthened climate plans to the UN after making pledges to do so during last year's climate change conference in Glasgow, Scotland. Last year, 3 main greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, hit record high levels in the atmosphere, causing major concern. As experts say, it is an ominous sign.
In all of those 3 gases, we have again broken new records. So we haven't seen any improvement in real atmosphere so far. And for example, during the past couple of years, we have seen lockdowns in many countries, and where the emissions have been dropping of carbon dioxide, but because of the very long lifetime, we haven't seen any improvement in the real atmosphere.
As global temperatures have already reached 1.2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, the UN's report added that attempts to combat climate change have been insufficient in preventing temperatures from reaching the pivotal 1.5 degrees. World leaders are set to meet again in less than 2 weeks for the next conference, COP27, in Egypt.
Europeans are concerned about air pollution. To alert and denounce the inaction of public authorities, 9 Belgian citizens are suing the country's regional governments for infringement of their fundamental rights. At 34 years old, Eric van der Zende thought he no longer suffered from asthma, but for several years now, he's been having trouble breathing again. And that's why he feels the need to act.
5 years ago, my asthma came back and I realized that there was a direct link with air pollution. Because when I had breathing problems, I phoned my doctor and she said that I was free to double my dose of cortisone for a few weeks. But you should know that your phone call comes at the same time as the pollution peak.
The legal action launched Monday comes just weeks after 7 citizens launched a similar case in Germany. The 9 Belgian complainants are calling on the authorities to reduce the pollution thresholds in line with the recommendations of the World Health Organization. On Wednesday, the European Commission proposed new, stricter rules on air quality. The aim is to bring the EU closer to the WHO standards by 2030 and to achieve zero pollution by 2050. Air pollution causes the premature deaths of 300,000 people in Europe every year.
With this legislation and the current legislation, we account that in the upcoming 10 years we will be able to decrease these deaths by 78%. So that will not only add to our citizens' health, but that will be a beneficiary for our economy.
The Commission is also proposing to make it possible to take collective legal action if citizens' health is affected by the violation of EU air quality rules, meaning the cases in Belgium and Germany could potentially be repeated in the near future. Christopher Pitchers, Euronews, Brussels.
Residents and tourists in many parts of Spain are enjoying an Indian summer with unusually high temperatures for the time of year. But of course there is a downside. The prolonged lack of rain and high temperatures have forced several regions and municipalities to impose tight restrictions on water consumption. They include Galicia, Andalusia and Catalonia. The fountains in these old ruins in the southern Catalonian city of Tarragona usually gush cold water. Now they're dry. The shortage is so severe that for almost a week now, residents have only been able to avail of access to drinking water for half the day. You can't use the same amount as before. We have to use a smaller amount. They'll have to connect us to the water from the Ebro River. The city authorities have for years been aware of the potential problem with water supply. They've been planning a project for years to connect the city to a pipeline that carries water from the River Ebro. But the works didn't get underway before this summer, and they're not likely to be completed until at least 2023, and that's if all goes well.
Anti-government protests in Iran aren't going away. Here in Tehran, like in dozens of other Iranian cities, people have sounded their horns, coinciding with 40 days since the death of Mahsa Amini, the young woman whose death in custody for improperly wearing the hijab sparked off the unrest. Videos posted on social media show young people chanting slogans against the autocratic regime in the streets and universities. In Amani's hometown, thousands of people have marched to the cemetery to pay tribute to her. So far, at least 234 people have been killed in the protests, according to the Iran Human Rights Group.
Former president and left-wing favorite Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has won the backing from a group of local mayors in Brazil ahead of Sunday's presidential runoff. Many Brazilians view the 30th of October vote as the country's most important election since the South American giant emerged from a military dictatorship in 1985. Analysts believe the outcome of the increasingly close race will be down to who gets the undecided voters on their side. Also on the campaign trail is the far-right Christian nationalist President Jair Bolsonaro. He's claiming Brazil is menaced by a corrupt left and has also accused the Supreme Electoral Court of interfering with the elections. Once again, without showing evidence, Bolsonaro alleged radio stations are unequally broadcasting electoral advertising. Lula came out on top in the first round and is currently 7 points ahead in the opinion polls.